I'm Gary Rosen, the editor of Wall Street Journal Weekend Review, and I'm here today with my colleague, Julia Angwin, who's written our cover piece this weekend about the grabbiest Facebook applications. So, hi, Julia.
Hello.
So tell me what this means for those who don't know Facebook well. What is an application on Facebook, and what does it mean for one of those to be grabby?
Well, so first of all, applications, Facebook uses the term to describe a couple different things. So if you've ever played a quiz or a game or used Facebook to log in at a site like Skype or Yahoo, all of those things are considered applications. Basically ways to use the Facebook service to either personalize your experience or something. And so basically, a lot of these apps get your personal info. So when you use the app, they actually obtain the data from your profile and sometimes from your friends' profiles. And we wanted to see, well, how much are they getting? Because this is a lot of personal information. I don't know about your Facebook profile, but mine has a lot of personal information on it.
Right. So what sorts of things are they gathering as you're using an app?
So they ask you, right, when you install the app, here's all the things we're going to get.
Yeah.
And so you are notified, but they are sometimes can be very sensitive. Things like your religion, your political views, basically all of these kind of details. And then those same details about your friends can also be obtained by the app.
About your friends?
Yes.
So do your friends know that's happening?
They're not notified, no. So the weird thing is that by default, the apps can get almost all that information about your friends without them being notified. Now, unless your friends have gone and there's a setting, you know how that is with Facebook, there's privacy settings. If you go to a certain part of it, you can turn off the ability for your friends' apps to get that information. But by default, it's on.
I see, but it takes a little bit of initiative
Yes.
on the part of the user. But the user, right? The user is presented with a permission, and does the permission spell out what sort of information the app is seeking?
It does. And so this is one thing we're exploring in this piece, is whether notice of this, providing transparency about the data you're giving is enough, right? There's a debate in academic circles about whether that is a good way to do it. We're early days in the personal data economy, if you want to call it that. And so people are experimenting. First, they used to have those privacy policies that no one read. Now they're going to these notices, right? But there's some data that shows that just like when you get those little, I agree to the terms of service for the next iTunes version or whatever, that people just say sure. They don't look at it, and so the data shows that people aren't really looking at it as much as maybe they should.
Yeah, and do people, even when they're going through and saying, okay, I realize they're collecting this, and you press agree, do they understand, you think, how that data will be used, where it might end up?
Right. That's the other problem, is that nobody has any sense right now where this data might end up. Right now, our idea of like what a Facebook app might do with data might be really limited. The other day, there was this story about the Girls Around Me app, which was not a Facebook app, it was a Foursquare app, which is a location service. But it took data about women who had sort of shared with their friends where they were, like at a bar or a coffee shop, and used it as sort of a stalking tool for men to say, like, hey, find women near you. And then it gave them links to their Facebook profile so they could almost sort of pretend to be like, oh, I knew you from high school, or some details like that that might be able to get them to have a conversation, which was creepy.
So part of the problem is that people just don't fully understand how much this data is being exploited and used.
People don't understand the future context of their data, right? You and I understand that we're having this conversation right now and it's going to go on a video and it'll be seen by lots of people, but we don't think if we're having this conversation in our house that it's going to be seen by the whole world. And that's sort of the problem, is that people understand what they're saying based on the context of the moment they're saying it. And they don't think ahead to like, oh, somehow somebody might later take this data and mash it up with some other data and then suddenly show off where I am at a bar.
Yeah, and this is big business, all of this data, right? So in a sense, I mean, can Facebook, can these app companies, can they afford not to be in the business of sharing lots of data?
Well, that's their business model. So
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, right now we don't pay for any of these services, right? So we, as consumers, we want everything for free. We want to get our Facebook and all
Yeah.
these services and free phone calls on Skype. Well, how are these guys going to make money?
Right.
Basically, they're collecting data about us and offering it to other businesses as a lure. You know, either to advertisers or to, you know, for like companies like LinkedIn or something, they might be using it for recruiters. But basically, that our data, we're paying with our data.
Now, is there anyone talking about industry rules for this, or legislation, or something that would somehow strike a better balance here?
I think, yes, the White House has called for this Privacy Bill of Rights. And the basic idea is that there should be some fundamental baseline privacy protections. Other countries, particularly Europe, have rules saying, look, if you collected the data when you were in the doctor's office, you can't go later sell it to marketers. We don't have rules about what's called secondary usage of data here in the U.S. And so this bill that the White House is calling for Congress to write up and pass would set some baseline rules about using data for uses other than the one it was collected for. But that's a long way off.
All right. So for people who are seeing us discuss this today, or reading your article, they can find out what the 100 grabbiest apps are that we found. But what more generally can people do as they begin to become aware of these sorts of things? How do you respond to this as a consumer?
Right. Well, unfortunately, the best way to respond right now is to pull back some of your data. So a lot of, you know, we interviewed some people who already had gotten wind of sort of how the apps were using their data and deleted their data. And what's interesting is if you go and look in Facebook, even if you don't think you've approved any of these services, there's a page with them on it. And I could have sworn I hadn't approved a single one, and there were like 40 on there. So one thing is people are going to have to get a little more vigilant about cleaning up their data that's leaking out in various places. But ultimately, that's bad for these businesses, for Facebook. They don't want people not to use their services. So if there's too much distrust, that's also going to mess up the business model. So hopefully there's a way we can find a happy medium.
All right. So, I mean, as you point out in the article, it seems like we've been doing social networking and apps and all of this forever, but it's a 5-year-old industry.
Right.
So we have a long way to go, and I suspect you'll be back with us again before too long writing about the newest developments. Okay, very good. Thank you, Julia. I'm Gary Rosen for Wall Street Journal Weekend Review, and be sure to see Julia's terrific article about the grabbiest Facebook apps in Review this weekend.